our perception is everything. And if you learn how to accept those things and see them for positive experiences or lessons or your curriculum in this life to like work through and to grow from and to experience different forms of love and just learning different understandings of yourself and the world around you, then it's always a positive thing, you know, in some way or shape or form. And it's definitely a part of my practice is to try to keep my perception in that direction.
Welcome to A Way of Thinking podcast. This podcast is dedicated to lighting the way towards greater inner peace and purpose. Hello and welcome to this episode of A Way of Thinking. I'm your host, Jessica Huang, and in this episode, I have the pleasure of interviewing fellow Dharma yogi and owner of Carlsbad, California yoga studio, Yoga on State, Rob Mendez. Rob and I talk about his journey from delivering babies during his time in the Navy to owning his own yoga studio. We talk about how yoga helped ease his health anxieties and the unconventional journey that led him to starting Yoga on State. He shares how it's been building up his studio without having a business background, and he talks about trusting in divine guidance and imagining that the best is happening all the time. So keep listening to hear my conversation with Rob Mendez. And before we get started, here are a few quick announcements. So first off, if you've been enjoying listening to A Way of Thinking, I invite you to donate to the podcast at my website, jessicahuangcoaching.com/donate. I so appreciate every single one of you for tuning in to these episodes. And next, if you are someone that is looking to make a change from a corporate job into that career, that creative career that you've always dreamed of, then I invite you to schedule a free strategy session with me at my website, jessicahuangcoaching.com. Links are, of course, in the show notes as well, and I hope to connect with you soon. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Rob Mendez. Our guest today is Rob Mendez. Rob served in the U.S. Navy for 5 years as a surgical technologist, hospital corpsman, working in the OR on various surgical teams. He is the owner of Yoga on State, a multidisciplinary yoga center located in Carlsbad, California. He is a teacher of Dharma yoga, yoga nidra, breathwork, and meditation. He is originally from New Jersey and is currently based in San Diego County, California. So welcome to the show, Rob.
Thank you, Jessica. It's a pleasure.
It's such a pleasure to have you on the show. Just by way of introduction, Rob and I met when we were doing our 800-hour teacher training together back in March. And we had talked about doing this podcast together. I think Rob is super inspiring, and I am so excited to finally have him on the show and be able to do it in person today. So it's been a real pleasure. We were both graduating at the Dharma Yoga Center this past weekend, and so it gave us the perfect opportunity to come together in person and do this episode. So I'm super excited for us to do this. And if you would, Rob, if you would lead us in an invocation.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. So let's start with an Om. Sit up tall and close the eyes and just ground down for a few moments. You can have your awareness with your breath or let your awareness just run freely. If it needs to go somewhere else, just let it be and just watch for a few moments. Now the attention come to the space between the brows. Imagine a golden Om. Imagine that it's radiating light in every direction. Let's chant the pranava. Inhale. Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kuru Me Deva Sarvakareshu Sarvara Sarasvati Namastubhyam Varade Kamarupini Vidya Rabham Karishyami Siddhir Bhavatu Me Saram. Lord Ganesha, guide us and protect us. May you remove all obstacles from our path to knowledge. May Saraswati Ma bless us with the fruits of knowledge and bless us with the fruits of understanding, of intuition, of inspiration. May we all find peace. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Thank you for that.
Thank
All right. So, Rob, I would love to start with the question I've been starting lately, all of the podcast episodes, which is what does purpose mean to you? And, well, let's start with that. Yes. What does purpose mean to you?
I think purpose is something that is beyond what our ego demands. It's something that typically is greater than us and our individual needs, and a purpose is something that is this like drive that kind of informs you what to make decisions on, right? And how to act and what to act towards. There's this a calling or this deep intuition or knowing or a guide that is pushing you towards this, whatever it is. And I think when we find our purpose, it's being tuned to that or receptive to it or listening to whatever that voice is or whatever that guide is.
Yeah, I love that. It's interesting because what you speak of is like this idea of like it's kind of like pulling us towards something, right? With our purpose. So along those lines, then I'm curious. So your path has obviously kind of like moved and shifted in a lot of different directions. I mentioned how you were in the Navy, you were working in ORs at one point, and then going into now owning your studio and everything. But if we can start kind of going back to like when you had joined the Navy and all that, like how do you see that as like how did that fit into your purpose?
When I was younger, I always wanted to help people. I had dreams of being a doctor. Was not mature enough when I was in high school, towards the end of high school, and transitioning to like college years, and was kind of lost in certain ways. And I weirdly didn't plan on joining the military. It wasn't something that was necessarily in the front of my psyche, but I knew that I wanted to do something in the medical field. So my plan was always to like study biology for pre-med to go down that path, but I didn't feel like I was ready for that in any type of way or mature enough. And I did 1 year of like community college, and I knew right then and there that I wasn't ready. So I took a little time off and was working at restaurants and bars, and I kept having dreams about the Navy randomly, and just like kept popping up. And it was very clear that if I was to join the military, it was to go into the medical field so I can have firsthand medical experience before I decided to go down that path. And most of my friends were always older, and I saw a lot of them get degrees that they hated and were kind of stuck in this pattern of getting in a lot of debt from school and having to work to pay that debt off and being trapped in either jobs that they didn't really care for, sometimes jobs completely outside of their major just so that they can pay the bills. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really want to get trapped in that experience, and felt that this was another option that could give me that firsthand medical experience plus free school afterwards. So after having some dreams about it for a little bit, I finally talked to my mom about it. And I'll never forget this conversation. We went out to dinner with her and my sister, and she I told her that I was thinking about it, and she kind of just like looked at me and smiled and was like, "Oh, I know." And I was like, "What do you mean you know?" And she's like, "Oh, I actually talked to a medium," she called it, or like a psychic, and they told her 3 things about me, which is pretty crazy. And one thing was that the relationship I was in at the time wasn't the right one, that I was going to break up with that partner, which happened. I broke up with her very shortly after that. The second one was that she saw that my back was turned towards her, and it wasn't that like there was anything wrong with our relationship, but it meant that I was going to go somewhere far, and I was either going to join the Peace Corps or the military or something along those lines, and like move at a great distance, which also ended up happening because I moved across the country from her. And the third one, which is also crazy, is that I was going to own my own business by 30, and I opened up Yoga on State when I was 30. And I was like,
Wow.
so she checked all the things. But when my mom responded like that, it was, I've always had this kind of mystical relationship with her and my grandma. And there's a lot of trust in some of the things that they tell me and their experiences. There's been some stuff that has happened at a young age that kind of broke my perception of reality, I guess you could say, in some ways, that some people will get through like hallucinogens, like things that it didn't make sense. So I always had this like kind of trust in what they said, or trust in another power, right? And because I was having the dreams about it and I got that confirmation from her, I was like, oh yes, like clearly this is what I'm supposed to do. And I always had this weird connection with the number 33, which is kind of funny too. It's like a little guide number. And I remember even when I went to take the test for the military, I sat at the 33rd computer, and it was just like big 33 on the computer. I was like, okay, another sign. Like this is it. So I ended up joining, and they gave me the job that I originally wanted was hospital corpsman. So I can be like a medic. And depending on how you do in that program, you can do some other schooling. And they gave me a surgical tech school. So I ended up doing that. And then, serving as a surgical tech for those 5 years, and got stationed at Naval Hospital Camp Pendleton, which is what originally brought me to California. And then it just became home. I fell in love with the place, the culture, and the people.
Amazing. So I'm curious. So just to clarify, your mom knew the Navy specifically? Because that wasn't in the 3.
No, it was just the
Just the,
military. Yeah, it was either that I was going to join the military or the Peace Corps, some type of organization that was going to like bring me away from her. So as soon as I said I was thinking about joining the Navy, it was just like clear to her that that's what that meant. And she's like, oh yeah, I know.
that is so
what? Like, okay, mom.
interesting. I love that. So, and then the other thing that I was curious about is, so when you were looking at the Navy, you already knew that it was like going to be this kind of medical element to it. I don't know anything about joining the
Yeah,
Navy. So if you could shed some light on
of
that.
course. Yeah. So normally you take a test, which is like the ASVAB test. And depending on how you score on the test, they give you different offers of jobs that they think are best suited for your conditions, I guess you can say, right? And they only offered me one job. And before I went in, that was the job that I wanted, was to be in the medical field. And so as a medic or whatever, because there's so many different jobs that corpsmen can do essentially in that umbrella of being a corpsman. So you can be a lab tech, a psych tech, a surgical tech. You can do field med tech, like trauma, like emergency stuff, recon stuff. So there's different options. And I didn't know I was going to be a surgical tech. That wasn't something that I planned. I just knew it was going to be in the medical field, because that was my whole purpose and goal. Was I still wanted to serve people and help people in a way of healthcare related, in a healthcare related field. I just wasn't sure on what the details looked like. And yeah, that was the only contract they offered me, and I was like, yeah,
That's
this is
it.
it. Yeah, this is where I'm supposed to be.
That's so interesting. Okay, so can you talk a little bit about what that was like in being a surgical tech? Because I know you told me that
Yeah.
you delivered babies, which I find absolutely fascinating. But can you talk a little bit about what that experience was like and what kind of work you were doing there?
Yeah. So essentially, for 4 years at Naval Hospital Camp Pendleton, specifically, you you rotate through different departments normally, or different specialties of surgery. It's between two departments, the OR and like sterile processing department. They work together as one unit because one feeds the other, and vice versa. So as we'll start from the bottom up, or from I think about from the bottom up, because in our hospital, the sterile processing department was actually a floor below. So you would send things in the elevator. So I think my brain still sees it that way. So in the sterile processing department, you sterilize all surgical equipment. You build what's called case carts. So every
Mm,
surgery has a cart that has all the supplies and like the gear that's needed, including like draping stuff for the table, stuff for the surgeon, for yourself. And all the different instruments that you'll need. So, as a surgical tech, you are in charge of getting all of that stuff together, talking with the surgeon or the nurse or whoever you need to talk in whatever department. Um, you pull your cases, you get all that organized, and then you take it to the OR. And if you're on in one of the OR teams, then you take your case into the room, and then you assist with surgery depending on what it is. So I went through, you normally do a rotation through all of them. So you'll be like on
mm,
one team for a few months or maybe a year, and then you go to another team, and vice versa. So everyone kind of gets like a balance and gets experience in different specialties. Because usually what happens is, after you transition out of the military, a lot of people continue to work as a surgical tech. And most of the time when you work in the civilian world, you usually choose a specialty and you'll stay with that specialty and you get
hmm.
like really good with it.
Right.
But in the military, they want you to be a jack of all trades, right? So you have to have experience in everything.
Mm,
And a lot of times you can work a duty shift where you're the only person there, so you have to know how to do everything. So it's an important part of the process, is to give you a little experience in each specialty. So did things like C-sections, did things like general surgery. So like appendectomies, like if somebody has appendicitis and we need to remove their appendix.
mm,
Did things like um, different like OBGYN procedures. Did things like orthopedics, so broken bones,
mm.
sometimes like surgery for shoulder cuff repair. We would have to like put anchors in, do stuff like that. And it was pretty cool because in the military, you get to do a lot more than you would in the civilian world. So I was able to
Mhm.
do everything from like hammering, stitching, cutting, and like, yes, you actually are like hammering things into people
Oh my
sometimes.
God.
And yeah, like hardware removal. Yeah, a little bit of everything. And I worked the night shift for a year. So essentially, there's two of us that are on. One person will be in charge of the sterile processing department, and then one person will be upstairs running the OR. And if there's any emergency procedures, then you're the one who does them all. So I did a lot of C-sections in that period, and a lot of them are like at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. You'll have like a little phone with you. After you finish all your duty stuff, there's like a call room. You can like lay there and like hang out and just be on call until you're needed. So
Mhm.
um, there was like some mornings, like 4 o'clock in the morning, like running down the hall, like trying to like um, open up the case. And before we even have like our gear on fully, we're already like ripping the mom's stomach open, like trying to
Wow.
get the baby out. So it was a high stress job at points, which definitely I think led to some health anxiety later on in the
Mm.
future after I was transitioning out of the military. But it was a very rewarding and life-changing and eye-opening experience. I did things that I would have never done otherwise, and it gave me a completely different understanding of the human body. And when you hold organs, or when you hold parts of the body that are no longer connected to the body, I like got firsthand experience of, I am not this body. Like, this person is not this body. I'm holding whatever it is,
Wow.
right? And it's, so that's also kind of a cool thing. So I'm very grateful for that experience, but I definitely don't do any of that anymore. And I don't think I would ever go back to that. After I transitioned out, I got offered this job, and I did everything I needed to do to start it. And literally 2 weeks before I was supposed to start, I had this realization where I woke up one day and I was like, all I want to do is yoga. Like, there's no way I can pretend. There's no way I can do anything else. Like, I don't care if I make money. I don't care what happens. All I want to do is yoga. Like, I want to practice yoga. I want to learn it, and I want to share it. That's it. Like, I don't know how it's going to work, but this is it. And I turned down the job and started working front desk at a yoga studio and practicing literally every single day, maybe twice a day, trying to be there as much as I could.
Wait, so
And
when
then my
did
whole life
you,
changed. Yeah.
yeah, when did you actually first start practicing yoga?
So I found yoga when I was pretty young, like 12 years old, but not like asanas. It was more like pranayama, meditation, and the philosophy, and like Hindu and Buddhist philosophies. It was actually from a band. Youth of Today was the original hardcore band that I listened to with my friends, and then they started this like Hare Krishna, like bhakti
Wild.
hardcore punk band called Shelter, and they had a big influence on me. They showed me yoga for the first time, and I fell in love at a very young age. It just felt like almost like home. Like, I could see myself like in the Himalayas. Like, I don't know. It was very weird, and I would draw like ohms everywhere. It was so funny when we got ohms like as part of our 500-hour training to like color ohms. I was like, I would literally do this all the time in high school. Like, all my notebooks had little ohms, and I would draw like little lotus flowers underneath, and then I would make these like huge ohms. And like, yeah, it was so I had this like connection or this attraction to it at a young age. I even had little like Ganesha Murti, and like I made a meditation closet and like put a tapestry over like my closet door, and would teach my friends how to like meditate and stuff. And I was vegan when I was like 14 years old for compassion reasons. Like, it
Wow.
was like, so I felt very drawn to it. And when I was 18 too, I got an Om tattooed behind my ear. I don't know if it was like an intuition thing, but it was like my reason to get it was to always be tuned to it and to always like listen for it, right? And when I joined the military, all the yoga stuff kind of was put in the back burner, right? I was still vegan when I was in the military, and I was considered a hippie. Like, my friends would make fun of me, which was actually pretty challenging being vegan in the military, especially stationed on base for short periods of time. It was almost impossible. And again, you definitely get a lot of crap talked to you for being vegan in the military, because there's a big culture of meat eating, right? And yeah, so it was put on the back burner for a little bit, and I didn't really come into an asana practice until I transitioned out of the military, which was when I was 27 years old, so 6 years ago. And it was funny, I was really bad health anxiety, and I was taking this chemistry class, and I would literally drive to the class and would have a mini panic attack like in the car, and would just be frozen, and I wouldn't walk in, and I would just sit there. And my lab partner was worried about me, and she was like, I really think you need yoga. And I was like, I don't think that's what I need right now, like, because everything that I was seeing which was taught as yoga was asana practice, and it was very exercise forward, exercise centric. A lot of hot yoga studios where I lived, and that was kind of my perception of what I thought common day yoga was, So I didn't really have an attraction to it at the moment. And I was like, no, I'm going to join a jujitsu gym. So I joined this jujitsu gym. And after practicing there for about a month, they had yoga, free yoga. That was a part of the membership. And I was like, and I kept getting these like messages from people, and they were like, you should try yoga. Like your anxieties, like I feel like it's going to help. And I was like, okay, fine. Like I'll listen. And I took the yoga class, and that was it. Like as soon as I took that first class, it was like I came home and I was like, oh, this, okay. And then I like stopped going to the jujitsu gym, and actually came out here and practiced with one of my best friends. He brought me to like my first yoga class, asana class at a studio, which was a studio here in the city. It was like a hot yoga studio. Have no idea what the name was. It was an incredible experience. I don't remember much about it. I remember sweating a whole ton and finding little moments of bliss in it, and really loving it. And then a couple months later, or no, it wasn't a couple months later. It was like a year later. I came back with the same friend and met Dharma for the first time,
Wow.
which was funny. Yeah,
That's so interesting.
I know this. Yeah, and I'm excited. I'm going to see that friend this next week when I'm subbing at the Dharma Yoga Center, and he's going to come to the class. So it's going to be like a full circle. He was there the first time I met Dharma, and now he'll be there while I'm teaching or leading a class, which is going to be a really cool experience, I think.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. So, yeah, when you were talking about that, I was just like, clearly you were a yogi in a past life. It's the first thing I was thinking. The fact that you were drawing ohms as a kid before we got the homework assignment just like cracks me up.
What's even weirder is I would read, I love Ram Dass and Babani Makroli, and reading stories about Babani Makroli Maharaji and how he has notebooks where he would just write Ram, 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 Ram. Those are my initials, and I would literally have to write Ram on everything growing up. Like all my like sports gears, like all my notebooks, like always, like even like ex-girlfriends would like write Ram with a heart. I'm like, whoa, I was kind of doing that too. I was writing Ram all everywhere. And now that's like who I feel connected to. I love Hanuman and Sri Rama, and like it's so interesting. And it was almost like I had these little messages from like past lives that were like, this is your practice, or like this is little reminders for when you get lost or whatever, you're in the Maya and you're just in the thick of it, and you need these little messages to kind of bring you back, or
That's really beautiful. Your story definitely makes me feel like it's like little seeds were just like sprinkled around without you realizing it, and they brought you to where you are now before you had any idea.
Totally. I still have no idea, but there's like stuff sprouting, and I'm like, oh, wow, this is beautiful. This is amazing.
I love that. Okay, so I want to go back a little bit because you were talking about these kind of like health anxieties and stuff like that. Like, was that related to like when you were in the military, or like what was coming up for you through all that?
It's kind of interesting. I've done a lot of reflection on it, and it's something that I don't struggle with it. It's something that I work with, right? It's a part of my practice and something that I'm still working with. The way I used to describe it is, it was like every day I was forced to watch a 2-hour long movie where I'm the lead character and I'm dying of some type of horrible disease. And it might not be that I'm watching the movie straight through every day, so I'm not just like zombied out for 2 hours, like thinking about dying, but just like broken up throughout the day. Like if I'm taking a shower for 15 minutes, there's like, if I have a mole or if I have like a pain, like whatever it is, like and because of my experience, I think this is where the military comes in, is seeing so much and knowing so much that can go wrong. And like, there's so many, little things, and my mind will spiral and will think, oh, I have this, and this, and it's because I did this, and this for years, or my past, or whatever. So there's like a mix of like weirdly guilt and like anxiety and all these things that come together. And through reflection and kind of paying more attention to my surroundings and my family, I also noticed that my grandma also has tons of health anxiety. And
Mm.
it's kind of funny because every time I talk to her, I realize that most of our conversations are her telling me about something that's wrong with her or like asking me advice on something. And because I was a healthcare professional, she like saw me as a doctor essentially and would just like tell me her whole list of medications that she was on, and like she totally is hypochondriac and has
Mm.
like very bad health anxiety. And
Mm.
I think I was conditioned to it from a young age.
Mhm.
Maybe it wasn't necessarily expressed because I was always pretty healthy. But when I look back, I definitely had I had like handful of experiences that were very dramatic and like panic attacks, like these like
Mhm.
health anxiety like cries where like I swore to my mom that like there was this like terrible thing wrong with me, and like we went and got it checked out and nothing was wrong with me.
Mm.
So, and back then it was just like, oh, it was kind of a normal thing because like it could have been whatever. But now looking back, it's like it kind of, when I see the bigger picture, it makes sense that it kind of was something that was developed and conditioned, and the military didn't help it. It kind of made it a little worse.
Yeah, I'm curious, like, is it kind of like because you were seeing, to your point, you were saying something along the lines of like that you could see how many things could go wrong
Yeah,
from working as a surgical tech, that then you were like, well, if something's wrong with me, then all these things could happen and then I could end up
100%.
dead.
Yeah,
Like, is that kind of
definitely. Most people aren't getting surgery because they're healthy. Like most of the
sure?
time, it's because there's something wrong, right? And
Hmm.
so you're kind of conditioning yourself to always looking for the worst, or always expecting the worst, or like seeing all the things that can go wrong with your body or with whatever. And
Hmm.
yeah, it worked, and or
Yeah.
it was, you know,
So what has helped you kind of, because you said that it's something that you've learned to manage, right? Like it's
yeah.
not that it entirely goes away, but what has kind of helped you learn to manage with that?
Honestly, yoga, yeah,
Yeah.
the practice, in multiple ways. One is because my body is healthier now, right? And
Hmm.
my nerves are healthier. I feel, um, I feel that that gives me a different type of confidence and a trust in my body to heal and
Hmm.
to be okay. And then also the philosophy, which was the biggest part of it, right?
Yeah.
And um, I heard something about like anxiety is like your worry about the future, right?
Hmm.
And yoga is always teaching you to be present, and
Hmm.
also teaching you that you're more than just your body, right? So
Yeah.
that combination of those two things, of instead of worrying like, oh, I'm going to have this, or this is going to be the outcome because I might have this right now, um, and whatever suffering that might bring, I'm just present. I'm like, oh, well, am I in a hospital right now? No, you know, I'm fine. I'm okay. And also, if that is what happens, then that's okay too, because this is temporary anyway. And you know, I, I have a strong belief in that I'm more than this body. So um, that freed me a lot,
Mm.
and I'll definitely catch myself getting caught up in certain things, right? And the moment I do, it's a lot easier for me to step back now and not identify so much with whatever feelings I'm feeling in those moments. And there's kind of an appreciation for it now. It's like, oh, how beautiful that I like care so much about this existence, right? And I have this attachment, and I should have this attachment because this is a very special situation, a very special experience, and I'm okay with that. I don't really, and I would also have guilt about it too, where I would um, feel so bad that I was so worried all the time, or like, or getting caught in that, because that you don't want to be someone who has anxiety. You don't want to be someone who feels paralyzed or any of those things, right? And sometimes you can be hard on yourself. So I don't feel hard on myself anymore either. I kind of think it's beautiful in a way, because I see myself almost as a child, and I'm like, oh, like, yeah, he had these experiences, these conditions, and of course he's going to react that way. Of course I'm going to experience that. So just let it be, and um, the more I step back, and instead of getting caught up with the identity of the body, and I can go back a little more, not the complete witness, but maybe just a step back, it feels a little lighter.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I was thinking about the cliches, like as you were talking about that, and
Yeah.
like attachment and aversion and our fear of death and everything. And I was
Yeah,
just like, wow, like it's true as we study those things, I feel like they give us this sense of peace
definitely.
that allows us to go like, yeah, everything is temporary and we're just trying to live in this present moment. So I thought that was really beautiful.
Yeah. Right. Knowledge is the way out of suffering. And
Absolutely.
so, yeah, once you start to get little bits of those awareness, or that awareness, it definitely frees you in certain ways. Definitely not a Jiva Mukti or a free soul or anything like that. But I've found some freedom in my life from some of the things that were making me feel really bound,
Yeah,
and trapped.
absolutely. Cool. So, yeah, so now I would love to talk a little bit. So you mentioned how you left the military
Mhm.
and you were starting this job. Was that related to medical at the time?
Yeah, it was managing the sterile processing department a at a hospital in Laguna Hills, and yeah, working in the OR with them.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was like a pretty long process. I even signed the contract, and literally like a couple weeks before I was supposed to start, I just woke up and I was like, I can't do it. I can't do this. All I want to do is yoga. I don't care.
That's
This is
so
what I'm doing. Yeah,
interesting. Yeah, because that you had mentioned that was kind of the like I guess normal quote unquote path that
exactly.
people take, right? Is that they do the surgical tech and then they end up working in this kind of
In the
work.
field,
Yeah,
yeah.
in the field outside of that. So yeah, so this thought where you're like, I just can't do this. Like, was it you had mentioned like your friend bringing you to the yoga class? So that was what kind of preempted that?
Yeah, I had already been practicing for I think it was like 3 or 4 months at this point, where I was practicing every single day and like didn't miss a day. I think I went like 96 days without missing a yoga class, and like
Wow.
and it was also at a hot yoga studio, so I was severely dehydrated. So maybe it was coming from a place of not being able to think clearly. Maybe I made the wrong choice. I'm just kidding. Yeah, and I was engaged at that point too, and it was my whole life rearranged.
Mm,
There was these things like I wasn't happy in the relationship, and for some time I kept lying to myself and to her about being in the relationship,
mm,
and after practicing every single day, I couldn't hide from myself anymore. I couldn't hide from that inner voice, that dialogue, and it
mm.
was just so clear. I was like, I can't be in this relationship, and I can't work at the hospital. Like, all I want to do is yoga. And that's what ended up happening.
So is this the point when you did you just start teaching or did you start your
I was
studio
not
or
teaching yet. No, I
okay.
was only studying and practicing.
Okay.
And it wasn't until 2 years after that point that I started the studio. And it kind of just, yeah, fell in my lap.
Okay. So can you because I know that's an interesting story. Can you talk a little bit about the journey to starting your studio?
Yeah, definitely not a traditional one. I don't really recommend it. I don't even know how I can recommend it, because it's kind of a very weird situation. But to to go from the beginning, I was working at another studio, and was like halfway through a 300-hour teacher training program with them, and COVID just started, and it felt it felt that I learned the things that I needed to learn with them, and there was just a lot of resistance and a lot of things that didn't feel good anymore. It doesn't feel right to say the things that happened in a
Mhm.
public setting because I don't want it to be a negative type of
Of course.
story or experience, you know. But there was just things that didn't align with my values and how I felt, and I needed to separate myself. And it was very clear, and I was very emotional and upset about it because it was the studio that I came into the asana practice with, and I did build some dear friendships and relationships at the time, and um, it definitely served me in so many ways, you know, and helped
Mhm.
me on so many levels. So I'm extremely grateful for them, for the whole experience, for everything. But sometimes you just get to a point in your life where you have to transition, you have to move. And it was very clear that that's where I was. And um, I was upset one night and literally in tears and said out loud, universe, like, I'm ready for another studio. Please send me another studio that I can teach at. And the next morning, uh, the owner of the studio of the location where I'm at now, I had met her, I think like 2 weeks before at like a local community event. And we exchanged contact information. And she called me and she's like, Rob, Spirit came to me in a meditation last night and told me to bring you to the studio. I want to offer you 5 classes. And I was like, what? I was like, thank you, God. You know, it was crazy, but true. And I accepted, and it was a little weird situation because it was COVID. So it was
Mm.
going to be online classes. And she said that she was going to leave town for a little bit and essentially like left me at the studio and had other people that were going to teach at other places, but like still do things online. And then after teaching a few classes, I ended up going to the space and got locked out. To give more details about the story, I taught in the morning and I had like thousands of dollars worth of my stuff there because I lived like down the street from the place, and I had like my computer, camera, microphone, like all this stuff.
It was
Stuff that I had
COVID.
just gotten for
Yeah.
because of COVID too, where I
Right,
was like,
right.
this is the trajectory. Like, I think we're gonna do online stuff. So like, let's figure this out,
Mhm.
right? And I went home and I got this clear voice that was like, you need to check on your stuff. And I was like, I kind of ignored it. And then it got very strong where I felt physically sick. Like I was like nauseous. And I was like, you need to go check on your stuff. I was like, okay. So I went to the studio, went to put my key in the lock. It didn't unlock. And I was like, what happened? Like, did someone change the locks? And I walk around the corner and the owner was there, like in the process of changing the second set of locks. And I was like, my stuff's in there. Like, what's going on? And he's like, listen, like, nobody was supposed to be here, like, we don't have a deal anymore, like, blah blah blah. And I was horrified. Like, we both ended up apologizing to each other for a half hour. He's like, I don't know if you're gonna hear back. And I was like, I was trespassing, I'm so sorry. Like, what if the cops came when I was in the middle of teaching a class? Like, this would have been awful. And for some reason had no thought, plan, or idea of this, but I was like, well, if this space is available, I'm interested. And meanwhile, I was only working the front desk at a yoga studio for 2 years, so made zero money, was a terrible candidate on paper, but had this like voice or idea or intuition that this was what was going to happen, or what the next phase of my life was going to be. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to try and just see what happens. And I was still doing social media for the other studio that I had left. And I didn't hear back for a few days from the property manager. I was like, there's no way I'm going to get accepted. Like, again, terrible candidate, made zero money, not a studio owner, don't have a following, don't have
Mm.
a foundation to like just start a studio and like be successful, or people to trust me to be able to do that. You know, I didn't even trust myself to do it. Like, how could a property manager, like some guy who I'd met one time and talked to for 30 minutes, just apologizing for trespassing, why would he trust me that I could do this, you know? Um, and then I had this like clear voice again that was like as soon as you cut the tie to the old studio and that part of your life, like everything will happen. And it was kind of emotional. I was in my backyard. I called the owner and told her I needed to completely walk away. And as soon as I said that, there was just like this moment of like bliss, and like I just like tears were just like coming down my face, and we got off the phone and I was just like sitting there in meditation, just like smiling, just felt so free, and had no idea what I was going to do, because that was again my only place that I had technically worked for 2 years, and like was my whole community, my everything was kind of based around that, which was already kind of weird because of COVID, but that still like meant so much to me. So I was just sitting there, and like after about a half hour of being in the same position, my phone rings and it's the property manager, and she's like, "You got approved." And I just start cracking up, like just like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, thank you, whoever did this. Like, I appreciate it. But now I have to figure out how to start a studio. um, so it's been a lot of just kind of weird, crazy. I don't want to say lucky, but like divine, I guess lucky, divine, like intervention, maybe you can call it, or some type of support or guidance that I don't understand. But I'm very grateful for. So if you hear this, please continue. I need all your help.
Wait, so did you ever hear back from the woman who brought you into
I
that
did.
studio?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It was kind of awkward. She
Yeah.
wanted to continue to, she wanted me to run a business for her while she was away. And the relationship with her and the previous person was done already. And it didn't feel right. And the studio itself was very different. Yeah. So it was very clear that we needed to go separate ways.
Yeah.
And she just did her thing. And then, and then I just started the studio and started finding teachers, and
I find it fascinating where it's just kind of like, it's almost like you get this message going like, go in this direction. And then once you say like, I am going in this direction, like things just kind of open up and the path clears into that direction, which is, I find it very interesting. Actually, I always find whatever conversations I'm having through my day somehow is meant to occur because I end up bringing it up in another conversation. At lunch today, I was talking with two Dharma yogis, and we were talking about this idea of like having like direction, right? That oftentimes people are living in this kind of like, we don't know where we're going, and life just kind of takes us wherever it feels like kind of feeling. And I was talking about how it's interesting, like when you do kind of craft a direction, it feels like the universe then conspires to bring those things to you.
Totally.
And your story definitely speaks to that. So it feels so, and I feel very similarly where it's like, I felt like for much of my life, I felt like I had no idea where I was going. And it was just like, oh, I just go where everyone tells me to go kind of thing. And it was when I started to be more purposeful about the direction I want to go in that I was just like, oh, everything just kind of opens up.
Yeah.
So I love that about your story. And it's funny because before we were recording this, I had asked, we were having this discussion around like, what were we going to talk about? What is going to go into this podcast? And you were hesitant about talking about your experience because of that element, I feel like, right? Like that ability to say like, well, I made this choice. I decided to go this way. And then like things just kind of conspired and happened that way. But I feel like there's so much power behind that. And there's, whatever divine or whatever thing is guiding us, like it is, there is something so, I don't know, magical, but I think it is really powerful, that ability to say like, I want to go, I feel like I need to go in this direction.
And listening. Yeah.
And you even spoke about like when you don't listen, it like that one, it made you want to throw up. Literally. Like that's like wild, right?
I think that happens to us a lot. I think if we were quieter We could
Mm.
pick up on some of these messages, but sometimes it's almost like swimming upriver, right? And we're like trying so hard to, sometimes we live outside of our purposes, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
we take on other people's purposes for us, or um, back to like the whole college thing was like I was thinking that like this was the path, like I needed to do this a specific way, and then I realized that like it wasn't right for me, and I didn't feel authentic, because I think I was again maybe listening to that voice then, but I think a lot of us can get lost in that, and if we just take a moment, really like try to connect with our deeper purpose, or whatever that is, and we get the answers, that we need.
Absolutely. How do you feel like it's been really creating the studio? You start, as you mentioned, you started really with no following, none of these like things. It wasn't like, oh, I'm just going to open it and everything will just like already be there. How was it really like building that up and
Yeah.
creating this business?
Honestly, I have no idea. It's been such a crazy experience, such a roller coaster in so many ways. But one of the most beautiful things that I've ever had the privilege and the honor of being a part of, and I'm kind of still like in disbelief and shock that like it's even a thing. Like
Mm.
it still feels surreal. Like I still don't understand why any of it's happening, why it's happened the way it does, why it happens the way it does, why these amazing people have come into my life, and like why all these connections continue to foster. But I don't want to overthink it, and I don't want to resist it, and I'm just kind of letting things happen. I a lot of times have described myself as just the usher of the studio. I think the studio itself has this very beautiful, potent energy, and there's just
Mm.
so many amazing people that come to the space, that are seeking more. And I think when there's a group of people that have like open hearts and this like intention of finding these deeper parts of ourselves, and life and God and all that, I think it fosters an energy with itself. So within those walls, there's this very potent energy, and I just go there every day. I open the doors, and then everything else just kind of happens around me, right?
Mhm.
Um, there's been times, because we did start during COVID, like there was months where we had to have our doors closed, where I was we had to move our classes to a lagoon outside and do like outdoor classes. And there was times where I was the only person who was able to be at the studio, and it was like super depressing and challenging. But there seemed to always be this like deep intuition, or this guide that was, and sometimes it would manifest in physical ways. When I really felt like lost or like needed it, I would cry out loud, and then like the next day get some type of weird message that like was like, no, stay on the path, like this is what needs to be done. um and then it's just a matter of showing up, and just trying, and everything else is seeming to kind of work in ways. you know yeah, I definitely don't have a blueprint on how to open a yoga studio. I don't have a business background. Um, I truly have no idea what I'm doing, but I show up. Uh, I love it. I'm extremely grateful for it. And I'm around truly special and amazing people, and have some of the best teachers that help me run that place, and teach alongside me, um, and have amazing guest teachers that come too. And like Gabrielle and Swami Kashi like will come and lead stuff. And I feel very fortunate um, to have met some people, and the fact that the studio has attracted all these amazing souls. I don't think that it's my doing at all. I don't think that I had anything to do with that. I think that I'm benefiting from it too. And I just happened to be in the right place at the right time that day when I like try to go back into the studio for whatever guided me. And it always seems to come from these places where I feel the lowest. And then I get to a place where I'm like either crying aloud or surrendering or saying, that's it. I'm done. Like, I don't know what to do. Like that one day that I was telling you that I like, told the universe that I needed another studio. Like I thought about walking home from California. I was like, I'm walking back to New Jersey. Like my car is broken. I don't care. Like, why am I here? Like I left my relationship, the people in my community, like there's this weird energy. Like I don't feel comfortable anymore. What's my purpose here? Why am I here? And then a few months later, the studio starts happening, and it's like whenever I'm like the lowest or when I think I'm like down and I I surrender, I always kind of get lifted back up and then reminded and um, guided, I guess.
That's beautiful. I love that because, well, I feel like I strangely feel like that's happened to me a lot too, where it's like it's almost this feeling that like everything that you've had so far needs to just like go away all at once, not in a slight like let's just let
easy.
yeah, not in the ease your way out of it. It's like no, let's just like burn it all to the ground and
Om Namah
restart.
Shivaya.
Yes.
It's time.
Yeah, and but there's something I feel like there's something so potent to that experience where it's just like that version of you needs to die too. And it then is opening you up to wherever you're going.
Yeah, and sometimes it's the limiting beliefs, right? Or the old stories, the old identities that we hold on to that become prisons or boxes. And a lot of times things work out way better than you can imagine, right? And it's trusting that that's going to continue to happen. Right? We literally train our minds to imagine the worst case scenario, and it becomes like a muscle, like a reflex. And that's what's something that I love about the Dharma practice too, is you imagine the best, right? Imagine that you're breathing in the best, that the best is happening at all times. And I really take that to heart and really practice that. And I think practicing that too has changed my perception of the things that are happening around me. And even when something terrible happens, I love how Dharma sometimes will talk about how when something bad happens to him, he's excited about it. And it's like, he's like getting through that karma. Right. And he's thankful for it. And I started to adopt that practice, and even because I've went through some really challenging experiences, even within the past few months, the past couple years. So it's not like my life has necessarily gotten easier since all this has happened. It's just my perspective continues to shift, and it continues to evolve or grow or change in ways that everything feels a lot lighter, and it feels perfect, right? And even the thing like my last relationship ending, which was like the one thing that I was the most attached to, and was the most scared of ending and having to face that ending. There's a beauty in that I really appreciate. And I can see how much growth has already happened just from that, right? So every hard thing that comes in my life now, I'm like, okay, what can I learn from this? And not only what can I learn from this, I know that in the future, the fruits are going to be better than I can imagine, because that's the trend, is that every time that I really think that like, that's it, like my life's done. What's the purpose? What's the point of any of this? And then like just beautiful things happen all around.
Yeah, I love that. It's yes, Dharma is having us build our positivity muscle, right? And it's so true, that ability to always look for the best, even in what feels like the worst. I couldn't agree more. It's like, I don't know. It's like the hardest things can happen, but our perspective of those hard things is totally different.
Yeah. And it's all about perspective, right? Because hard
Mm,
things always happen, right? This is duality. Like there has to be suffering. That's just inherent in the nature of this existence, right? There's no escape of it. There's no escape of bad things happening. We grow old. Our bodies are gonna face disease or death, decay at some point.
mm,
Every single person you've ever loved is going to leave their shape and form, right? So you're gonna have to face hard things always. Like my dog Rusty, I don't know how I'm gonna handle his transition, you know? Uh so I know that I have these huge challenges that will come up in my life, right? But our perception is everything. And if you learn how to accept those things and see them for positive experiences or lessons or your curriculum in this life to like work through and to grow from and to experience different forms of love and just learning different understandings of yourself and the world around you, then it's always a positive thing, in some way or shape or form. And it's definitely a part of my practice is to try to keep my perception um, in that direction.
amazing. All right. I want to keep talking to you
We
forever.
can do another one in the
We,
future. Yeah.
oh yeah, I would love that. But is there anything else that you want to share that we have not already talked about?
Um, don't listen to me. I'm just kidding. Don't do what I did and quit your job and just do yoga. No. Hmm. I think if I can share anything, it's be grateful, appreciate everything that you have, even if it's hard things, even if it's challenging. Um, appreciate every moment and um, and trust that there's a divine order to things, or trust that there's a plan that's outside of yourself or the little self, the individual ego. Trust that there's that what's ahead of you, like Dharma says, is amazing.
Absolutely. Yes. All right, let's get into our final questions.
Okay.
The first question is, how would you describe your current relationship to yourself?
Um, an ever evolving process. I Yeah, it's like a series of explorations. I feel like I'm constantly trying to learn more about why I'm the way I am, at the same time kind of giving myself freedom and not pushing too much or trying to figure it out too much. And so it's kind of this like, I don't even know how to describe it. A work in progress. It's a work in progress.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
love that. What do you consider most valuable to you right now?
Hmm. And people around me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the time I get to spend with people around me, having an amazing teacher like Sri Dharma Mitra. The Dharma family is incredible to like be connected to, uh, not only like a yoga lineage, but like uh, it truly is like a family, right? And the people at Yoga on State and like the studio family, definitely, and my dog. I value all those relationships the most.
Yay, Rusty.
Yeah.
What is the best lesson that you've learned recently?
Hmm. That it's okay to be alone and non-attachment. with like relationships and partners, and yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and giving, not having an attachment either to how you think you should react to other people too. So like if you have a failed relationship, instead of thinking that there should be a clear identity of why it failed, or um, what your role or what the other person's role is, and to kind of just let people change and evolve, and not feel any attachment to the stories that we tell ourselves and each other of who we think we are, um, and giving people the space to continue to grow, including yourself.
Absolutely. I love that. All right. What is the number one skill that you believe everyone should work on?
Compassion, for sure. And not just because I'm a Dharma yogi, but I really think that most people could benefit from having more compassion to all beings, right?
Yeah.
We pick and choose who we have compassion to. I mean, it's completely natural. People that are like us. And I think challenging yourself to develop compassion for people that aren't like us, for other types of beings. Yeah. And knowing that we all want the same thing. We all want to be happy and love. And I think the more we develop that, the better this place will be.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
All right. Your last question is, what do you believe is kind of like the purpose of life?
The purpose of life.
Yeah.
There is no purpose. Because it's happening forever, right? Why does there have to be? Only the ego needs a purpose. Only the thinking mind needs to define things in those types of ways. I think like any purpose that we come up with is beautiful, and I think that there can be a lot of value for this existence and this experience, and because we're still these beings, right, that are walking around talking to each other, and we have to eat, we have to do certain things, so we can't check out of that. So it's important to still have purpose and to move in certain directions. But I think all of those things, the words, the story, the dialogue, all of it is just a human experience, right? And I truly believe that we're not humans. We're experiencing being humans, and from that identification, from that belief, then the purpose kind of disappears the more you go back.
Sure.
So purpose of life, I guess, I have no idea. Um, I think it changes depending on who you are, what you need, what your conditions are in this round uh, of experience. Maybe one life your purpose is to learn all the asanas. Maybe one life it's to be the best vegan. I don't know. I think it can change. I think it would be very controlling or egocentric for me to think that I know everyone's purpose of life or the purpose of life. Yeah.
To each his own.
To each his own. Whatever feels right to you in this moment, and it can change.
Absolutely.
And don't be too attached.
Yes.
Play. The purpose of life is to play. That's what my purpose is. To play and to experience.
I love
to
that.
love. Play, experience, and love.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Rob, for coming on the show.
Thank you.
This was such a pleasure. And I always love going into these being like, I don't know what the conversation is going to be like, but whatever is meant to come through will. And I feel that in particular with this conversation. So thank you so much. And I would absolutely love to have you on again.
Thank
We'll do that I don't know when, and
you.
it'll be a completely different conversation and a completely different version of ourselves.
Yeah.
But it was a real honor. So if anyone tuning in wants to contact you, of course, they can go to Yoga on State in Carlsbad. But how else can people connect with you?
I think probably social media are the best channels. So Yoga on State is the studios page. So if you ever want to, if you're ever traveling to Southern California, whether you're looking for Dharma classes or different styles of yoga, because we are multidisciplinary, you can always come practice with us. We do a 200-hour teacher training, so you can always study with us and get an introduction to yoga through that. You can always message me on my personal one, which is Rob Mendez Yoga. More than happy to connect in any type of way, to share any of my experiences or to share any of the practices that I personally practice or have been taught, or just to talk,
Absolutely. And I will say that for whatever reason, the universe brought me to San Diego in April.
Yeah.
And I had the pleasure of practicing in Rob's class on Saturday, your 2-hour masterclass. And it was such a treat.
Thank you.
It felt like coming home in a different place. Normally we're here in New York at Dharma Studio, but there was something so special about being in your space and taking class with you. So I highly recommend taking a class with Rob.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Rob.
Thank you.